Imagine someone who just got a stable job. The salary is good. The company is respected. The paycheck arrives on the same day every month. For the first time in their life, everything feels secure. They move into a nicer apartment. They upgrade their phone. They start going out more often. Nothing extreme, just small improvements. A better couch, a nicer vacation, a car that feels a little more comfortable than the last one. And at first, it feels like progress, like life is finally moving forward. But something strange starts to happen over the next few years. The job becomes more important. The paycheck becomes more necessary. And the lifestyle that once felt like freedom slowly turns into something else, a quiet form of pressure. Because now, walking away is no longer easy. And almost nobody talks about this part. The moment when financial comfort quietly turns into a trap. My name is Jimmy, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, investing, and the psychology behind how people use it. If you're someone who wants to understand money a little better, consider subscribing and giving this video a thumbs up. Because today we're going to talk about something that sounds harmless. Financial comfort, and how it slowly traps millions of people without them even realizing it. Here's the thing. Most people believe the biggest financial risk in life is instability. Losing your job, not having enough income, financial chaos. But the truth is, instability rarely traps people. Comfort does. Now imagine someone named Daniel. Daniel is 27 years old. He just landed his first serious job at a large company. The salary is $65,000 a year. Nothing extraordinary, but it feels like a huge step up from his previous life. For the first time, he can afford things without constantly checking his bank account, and that feeling is powerful. The first thing Daniel does is upgrade his apartment. Nothing crazy, just a nicer place in a better neighborhood. Rent jumps from $800 to $1,400 per month. Still manageable. Then a few months later, Daniel upgrades his car. His old one worked fine, but it was getting older. The new one costs $480 per month. Again, still manageable. Then come the smaller things. Subscriptions, better clothes, weekend trips, food delivery instead of cooking. None of these decisions feel reckless. In fact, they feel responsible. Daniel is just improving his quality of life. But here's where things get interesting. After about 2 years, Daniel's monthly expenses look very different. Rent, $1,400, car payment, $480 insurance, $210, utilities, $180, subscriptions, $120, food, $700, entertainment, $400, travel savings, $250. Suddenly, Daniel needs around $3,700 every single month just to maintain his lifestyle. And this is where most people make a huge mistake. Because Daniel doesn't feel trapped. He feels successful. But the reality is something else entirely. His lifestyle now depends completely on the continuation of his current income. If the job disappears, everything becomes fragile. And the strange part is that Daniel would have felt far less pressure 2 years earlier when he actually had less money. But the real issue isn't what you think. The problem isn't spending money. The real problem is how comfort quietly rewires your financial psychology. Because once your brain adapts to a higher standard of living, it begins to treat it as normal. Not luxury. Normal. This concept is called hedonic adaptation. Psychologists have studied it for decades. The basic idea is simple. Humans are incredibly good at getting used to things. The first time you double your income, it feels incredible. The 10th month, it feels ordinary. The first time you move into a nicer apartment, it feels exciting. 2 years later, it just feels like home. And this creates a bigger problem, because your expectations quietly rise with your lifestyle. And once your expectations rise, going backwards starts to feel painful. Here's a simple example. Imagine someone who has always driven a modest car. Maybe it's 10 years old. It works fine. It gets them where they need to go. Then one day they upgrade. Leather seats, silent engine, technology everywhere. For the first few months it feels amazing. But eventually, it becomes normal. And this is where it gets interesting. If that person ever had to go back to their old car, it would suddenly feel terrible. Even though it used to feel completely fine. That's the comfort trap. Your financial life becomes built around maintaining a certain level of comfort rather than building long-term freedom. And almost nobody notices when this shift happens. Now look at what happens next in Daniel's story. 3 years into his job, Daniel gets a promotion. His salary jumps to $80,000. Naturally, he celebrates. He upgrades a few things again. A slightly better apartment, more travel, more convenience. Life continues improving. And again, none of these choices feel irresponsible. But something strange starts to happen. Daniel's stress level slowly increases, even though he's making more money. And this confuses him. Shouldn't life feel easier now? But the real issue isn't income, it's dependency. Because Daniel's lifestyle now requires his income to continue at a certain level, every month, without interruption. Now you might be thinking, well, that's just normal life. And in many ways it is. But here's what most people don't realize. Financial stress is rarely caused by low income. It's caused by fragile financial structures. Let me explain. Imagine two people earning the exact same salary, $80,000 per year. Person A spends $70,000 per year maintaining their lifestyle. Person B spends $45,000 and invests the rest. After 10 years, these two lives look completely different. Person A has a nice lifestyle, but their freedom depends entirely on continuing to earn. Person B has something else. Options and options are the real currency of financial freedom, because money isn't just about buying things. Money buys flexibility. It buys time. It buys the ability to say no. And this is where the comfort trap becomes dangerous, because the more comfortable your lifestyle becomes, the harder it becomes to protect your options. Now let's zoom out for a moment. There's a famous statistic from the Federal Reserve. Roughly 60% of Americans cannot comfortably handle a $1,000 emergency expense. And when people hear that statistic, they often assume it's only low-income households. But that's not entirely true. Many middle-income earners live in the exact same situation. The reason? Lifestyle expansion. Expenses quietly rise to match income. And eventually, income stops creating freedom. It simply maintains the system. But something even more subtle is happening beneath the surface. Comfort changes how people think about risk. And almost nobody talks about this part. When someone has very little to lose, they often take more risks. They start businesses. They change careers. They experiment. But once someone builds a comfortable lifestyle, risk suddenly feels dangerous because the downside becomes much larger. Imagine Daniel again. 5 years into his career, he's earning $95,000. He has a nice apartment, a new car, nice furniture, great restaurants, comfortable routines. Everything looks successful from the outside. But Daniel quietly feels stuck. There's a business idea he's been thinking about for years, something he's passionate about. But pursuing it would mean uncertainty. It might mean less income for a while. And that thought immediately triggers fear. Because now Daniel has responsibilities, bills, expectations, a lifestyle that depends on stability. So the idea stays in his notebook, year after year. And this is where the financial comfort trap becomes psychological, because comfort doesn't just affect spending, it affects courage. The more comfortable life becomes, the more your brain wants to protect it, even if protecting it means sacrificing long-term opportunity. Now here's where things get even more interesting. The comfort trap isn't only about spending, it's also about identity. When someone begins earning more money, they often start associating their lifestyle with who they are. The neighborhood they live in, the car they drive, the places they go. These things quietly become signals of success. And once that identity forms, changing it becomes emotionally difficult. Downgrading feels like failure, even if it's financially smart. And this is why lifestyle inflation is so powerful. It's not just economic, it's psychological. But the real danger shows up over long periods of time. Let's look at a simple financial example. Imagine two people. Both earn $80,000. Person A spends $70,000 per year. Person B spends $50,000 and invests $30,000. If person B invests $30,000 per year in a simple index fund returning around 7% annually, after 20 years they would have roughly $1.2 million. That money could generate around $40,000 to $50,000 per year without touching the principal. Now look at what that means. Person B now has partial financial independence, options, flexibility, time. Person A still depends on their job, still needs the next paycheck. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because person A probably had a nicer lifestyle for most of those 20 years. Better vacations, better cars, better apartments. But the cost of that comfort was delayed freedom. Now you might be thinking, so are we supposed to live like monks and never enjoy life? Of course not. That's not the point. The real lesson is awareness, because the financial comfort trap doesn't appear suddenly. It appears slowly, quietly, through dozens of small decisions. A slightly nicer apartment, a slightly better car, a few more subscriptions, a few more conveniences. Individually harmless, collectively powerful, but something fascinating happens when people reverse this mindset. Instead of asking, "What can I afford right now?" they start asking, "What kind of life will give me the most freedom 10 years from now?" And that question changes everything, because freedom compounds, just like money. Every dollar invested today buys a little more independence tomorrow. Every year of lower expenses reduces the amount of money required to support your life. And this is where things start to shift. Let's return to Daniel one more time. After several years in his career, something happens that forces him to rethink everything. His company restructures. Several departments are eliminated. People he has worked with for years suddenly lose their jobs. Some of them were earning well over 6 figures. But many of them had expensive lifestyles, large mortgages, luxury cars, private school tuition, and suddenly, their entire financial structure collapses. Watching this happen shakes Daniel, because for the first time, he realizes something uncomfortable. His lifestyle is far more fragile than he thought, and that realization becomes a turning point. Instead of upgrading his life further, Daniel makes a different decision. He stabilizes it. He keeps his current apartment instead of upgrading. He finishes paying off his car and doesn't replace it. He automates investing every month. At first, it feels strange, because most of his friends are doing the opposite. Bigger houses, newer cars, more visible success. But Daniel starts to notice something else. His stress begins to drop, because every year his investments grow. Every year his financial dependency shrinks slightly. And this is where the story changes. The comfort trap is replaced by something much more powerful: quiet ownership. Ownership of assets, ownership of time, ownership of options. And this shift is subtle but profound, because the ultimate goal of money isn't lifestyle, it's autonomy, the ability to decide how you spend your time, who you work with, where you live, and what risks you're willing to take. But here's the paradox. The people who achieve that freedom rarely chase the most comfortable lifestyle in the beginning. They delay parts of it. They build assets first, and lifestyle second. Because here's the truth. Income can create comfort, but only ownership creates independence. And once you understand this, your financial decisions start to change. You stop asking, "How much can I spend?" and start asking, "How much freedom does this decision cost me?" That new car payment, that bigger apartment, that lifestyle upgrade, each one has a hidden price, not just dollars, years of future freedom. And once you see that clearly, the comfort trap becomes much easier to avoid, because comfort feels good in the short term, but freedom feels better in the long term. And the people who understand that difference are the ones who eventually escape the trap entirely, not because they earned the most money, but because they never let comfort quietly take control of their future. Because here's something else most people don't realize. The comfort trap doesn't just affect individuals, it affects entire decades of someone's life. Think about how many people reach their 40s or 50s and suddenly feel an invisible pressure that didn't exist when they were younger. On the surface, their lives look successful. Stable career, nice home, reliable income. But underneath that stability is something fragile: obligation, mortgage payments, tuition costs, car loans, lifestyle expectations that have been building quietly for 15 or 20 years. And this is where things get interesting. At that stage of life, many people actually earn the most money they've ever made, but they also have the least amount of flexibility, because their financial structure has grown around their income, like a cage. A comfortable cage, but a cage nonetheless. Now look, this isn't about blaming anyone. This pattern happens because humans naturally optimize for comfort in the short term. Our brains evolved to solve immediate problems: food, shelter, safety, not 30-year financial strategies. So when income increases, the brain rewards lifestyle improvements. Better living conditions feel like progress, and to some extent, they are. But the brain doesn't naturally calculate long-term optionality. It doesn't ask, what happens if I design my life around needing this income forever? And this is where it gets even more fascinating, because the people who escape the comfort trap often follow a completely different mental model. They measure wealth differently. Instead of measuring wealth by visible lifestyle, they measure it by independence. A simple way to think about it is this: wealth is not how much you spend. Wealth is how long you could live without needing to earn. If someone spends $60,000 per year and has $600,000 invested, they have 10 years of financial runway. 10 years where income is optional. That's a completely different level of security than someone earning $120,000 but saving almost nothing. And this is the quiet power of building assets early. Assets turn time into an ally. Every year your investments grow, the pressure on your income shrinks. Slowly, almost invisibly, but powerfully. And the people who recognize this early start making slightly different choices. They don't necessarily live extreme lifestyles. They still travel. They still enjoy life. But they avoid one critical mistake. They don't allow their permanent expenses to grow too quickly. Because permanent expenses are what lock people into the comfort trap. Things like housing costs, car payments, and lifestyle commitments that can't easily be reversed. Once those become too large, your income stops creating freedom. It simply feeds the system. But if you keep those commitments reasonable, something amazing happens. Every raise becomes powerful. Because instead of upgrading your lifestyle immediately, you upgrade your ownership, more investments, more assets, more independence. And eventually, something shifts. The job you once depended on becomes optional. Opportunities that once felt impossible suddenly become realistic. Starting a business, changing careers, taking a break, moving somewhere new, all because you protected one simple thing early on: your flexibility. So if there's one idea worth remembering from this entire conversation, it's this: financial comfort isn't the enemy, but unmanaged comfort quietly becomes a trap. And the goal of money was never comfort alone. The real goal was freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to change direction, freedom to design your life intentionally instead of financially reacting to it. And the people who achieve that freedom rarely look extraordinary in the beginning. Their lives often look normal, but behind the scenes, something very different is happening. They're slowly building a life where comfort is optional, but freedom is permanent. And if you zoom out far enough, you'll notice something interesting about the people who eventually reach that point. Their lives rarely look dramatic while it's happening. There's no single moment where everything suddenly changes, no lottery win, no overnight success. Instead, their lives are shaped by dozens of quiet financial decisions that most people barely notice. Decisions like keeping the same apartment even after a raise, driving a car for 10 years instead of 5, investing money automatically every month before they even see it. None of these decisions feel exciting. In fact, from the outside, they can even look boring. And that's exactly why they work. Because while other people are upgrading their lifestyle every time their income increases, these individuals are upgrading something invisible: their future flexibility. And over long periods of time, that difference becomes enormous. A person who invests consistently for 20 or 25 years isn't just building money. They're building breathing room. Breathing room to handle unexpected events. Breathing room to take risks. Breathing room to redesign their life when their priorities change. Because here's another reality most people don't think about when they're young. The life you want at 25 might not be the life you want at 45. Careers change. Interests change. Energy levels change. Sometimes even entire industries change. And the people who adapt best to those changes are the ones who protected their options early on. But the comfort trap quietly removes those options. It locks people into financial structures that require consistency at all costs, which means they must keep doing the same thing, even when they no longer want to. And that's a strange place to end up, because money was supposed to increase freedom, not reduce it. So the real challenge isn't avoiding comfort entirely. Comfort is part of enjoying life. The challenge is preventing comfort from becoming permanent dependency. And one simple way to think about this is to separate two types of upgrades: temporary upgrades and permanent upgrades. Temporary upgrades are flexible. A vacation, a special experience, a celebration. These things improve life without permanently increasing your financial obligations. But permanent upgrades are different. A larger mortgage, a long-term car payment, a lifestyle that requires a certain income every month just to maintain. Those upgrades quietly increase the size of the cage. And the bigger that cage becomes, the harder it is to step outside of it later. But if you stay aware of that difference, something powerful happens. You begin designing your life intentionally instead of accidentally. You start realizing that every financial decision is also a time decision. Every expense is a small trade between present comfort and future flexibility. And once you see money through that lens, the comfort trap stops being invisible. It becomes a choice between building a life that looks rich today or building a life that actually becomes free tomorrow.